I kind of facilitate the preparation of the lighting department. I was never inspired to get into the industry. To cut a long story short, I never wanted to be in it. I like movies. My dad was into movies, and I liked movies, and I was always inspired by movies, but never thought I would be into being in working on movies. Then when I did my foundation course, so in England we do a foundation course. I did fine art. I was into painting. We had a module which you could do video, not video, TV, and they had like a TV studio run by this guy called Rod. His name is Rod McDonald, which is not Ronald McDonald, no, but Rod McDonald. Very nice man. He'd probably be my age now. And he just went, "Oh, you're very natural. You've got a natural." I had no tech problem or anything. And I liked cameras. I was into photography. But it wasn't on my horizon. So I never thought, oh, I'll be into film or whatever. But because I liked it, or I felt very natural at it, it came, I was like, oh, but anyway. So we finished that and I went to do my fine art course and into painting. And in the first year, I got very disillusioned with the art painting, really, and I stopped. And then I happened to meet. I think it was being at college and being away from home and just being a little bit like, oh. And I was in a bed sit, which was not very nice. I just was like, oh, this is not what I expected. And the passion for my art had sort of disappeared. I was so obsessed with it. So I hit a bit of a blank wall, and I just happened to be in the canteen, the refectory canteen, in talking to this guy, and I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm making Super 8 short movies." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And I hadn't done any. Had I done some Super 8? No, I hadn't sort of played around with cine cameras. So I said, "Oh, can I have a look?" And he showed me. And I said, "Oh, I'd really like to do something." He said, "Well, there's a video camera. It was 298, no, 95, 85. Ooh. 1985, and they had an old pneumatic 3-chip camera, I think it was, with like a big umbilical cord and this big thing you had to carry around. I'd never even seen one of these things. So I pushed buttons, made it work. The teacher had gone on a sabbatical. We had no instruction, thankfully. And we just made, so he was a bit older than me. He was quite political, gay, was very much into this kind of, he was like into Russian constructivism and performance art and stuff like that. And he had much more of a clear idea what he wanted to do, whereas I didn't. So I just became the technical guy because he wasn't. And I think that's kind of stuck actually a little bit. And I was never scared of tech. I'm not into tech. I'm not a tech guy, but I'm never sort of overwhelmed by it. Maybe these days a little bit with all the stuff that's going on. So we did it, and then somebody went, "Oh, that's great!" And we went into the video editing, messed around with it, and I slowed it down. It all got very kind of grungy, and then we filmed that, and then slowed that down, and messed around, and chopped it up, and made this whole performance art. And because we were ignorant, we didn't see failure as an option, so we just did it. And then I was, so at the end of my college, I started doing lighting, and again, purely by accident. This guy who was a friend of the guy I worked with. So we did 2 years of performance art. We used to do these performances, and became a bit of a thing in the scene in Liverpool. And his friend, who was in a band called, his nickname was Biffer, was doing video. He was doing stage lighting and theatre lighting, not stage lighting, performance art lighting in this place down in Liverpool. His girlfriend at the time was running it. She was kind of a scene on the punk scene, so it all became a scene. I said, "I'd love to come and help," so I just did. And I started, and I literally turned up on Monday and was like, "Hey, what can I do?" And we had no money, classic thing, 80s, vibe. And like these bands would turn up from all over the world, and very, in hindsight, very famous bands. They weren't like local bands, but they were touring, and they'd come and stay for 2 days in that venue. And we would literally turn up on Monday, on the morning of the concert, and say, "So what are we doing?" And they'd be like, "Well, they're kind of punky." So we're like, "Okay, punky." And we do these kind of. So we had some par cans and stuff, and gels, and a board which I learned to use. And then I'd plug stuff in that would blow up. I'm like, "Ooh, don't do that." Or fix it. I'd just be like, "Oh, well, how does it work?" I'd take it apart, and it was pretty simple. And then at the end of that, he unfortunately he died. He came in one day and said, "I've got a terrible headache," and he actually had a brain abscess, and he died within a couple of weeks. And it broke my heart actually, because he was a great inspiration to me in more than ways than one. He was very punky and was into music and very inspirational kind of person actually. And I got quite unhappy, and I was working there for no money. And then somebody I had a young child. My life got quite messy. My brother died, and all these things happened. This guy died, then my father died, and I was just like going through this whole thing. But I needed money, and somebody said, "Oh, there was this TV show, like it was called Brookside, and it was like a serialized soap opera, which had started in the '80s, and they said, "Oh, they need people to work in the art department. Would you be interested?" And I went, "Yeah, I'll just do anything for money, really." So I did that. Did that for 6 months, and then I went to another show and doing props, and I didn't like any of it. And then I did a bit of location assisting and things like that. So I kind of got into the industry again randomly, and then unfortunately it all came on top, and it all got very difficult for me. So I left and moved to Spain, where I met my wife. And again, I started painting again, and then we left, came back to England. Then again, I started meeting people in the film industry. I just wanted to be a painter, and of course, don't make any money. And then suddenly somebody said, I met somebody purely by chance, and they said, "Oh, we're looking for electricians to work on a movie in Leicestershire, up in the north, middle of England. Would you be interested?" I said no, and it was no pay. It was unpaid. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold. Unpaid, and I said, "Well, listen, fuck it, I'll do it." I don't know, something in my head said, "There's a reason you're doing it." So I sort of went into it, and I was 28, 29, so I was getting to that age. I was like, I need to get a career. My wife was kind of a bit like, "You need to get, sort your stuff out. We're not living in a garret for the rest of our life." Not that we were that, but she was working, and I didn't have a job. So, and then suddenly I did this, and it was kind of a bit of a life revealing thing. It was kind of like, anyway, the movie was terrible. It was very disorganized. Not. It never came out, actually. It was a gangster movie. Set in. It was like Goodfellas, Pakistan, Goodfellas, and it was actually probably had quite a good script from what I remember, but they just didn't really have a clue how they were going to do it, and it was a vanity project, really.
Yeah.
Anyway, and the best boy, electrical best boy, said, "Oh, you're really good. What have you done?" I was like, "It's my first job," and he's like, "Really?" I says, "Yeah. I mean, with all due respect, I never found it difficult." Because at the end of the day, you were told what to do. I wasn't getting paid, so I had no. Again, I think there's a theme actually is that I'm prepared to give it a go, and because I have no pressure to perform in that sense, I was like, well, I had nothing to lose. And actually, if you have nothing to lose, you probably go further. Because I never felt like it was like, well, if I'm no good, I'm no good, But I was good. So he passed my name to people who were in the industry already. They're always looking for people to go out on jobs, and yeah, they sent me out as an electrician. On the first thing I did was Sleepy Hollow, I think, something like that. Quills, Band of Brothers, and I think because I'd grown up with three older brothers, I was quite good at dealing with the male side of it in the sense of being amongst a gang of guys. It's not my natural place, but and I was not technophobic, so I was kind of like, well, okay. And I loved art, and I loved photography, and I loved um, the frame, and I really like the
Yeah.
whole thing about how movies are made. So I find it was like I was a bit like a tourist in it in a way at the beginning, but I loved it. And people would ask me what I think. Oh, and then I gaffed, and I started gaffing. And so I still worked part time because I wasn't earning enough money to do both. And I got a job as a gaffer on a commercial through a friend. And I was like, and they would ask me what I thought. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So people would they were curious as what I thought about things, and I kind of was like, oh, I'm not, you know, I don't know. I never expected somebody to ask me what I thought about it, but I was opinionated in that sense. I had opinion about art and stuff. So I'd be like, oh, and they're like, oh, you're interesting. Because actually, a lot of gaffers in those days didn't do that. They didn't. They were like, oh yeah, it wasn't their kind of thing. They were into the mechanics, but not the
Art.
artistic side of it, or
Yeah.
what the frame meant, or what the dialogue. What the point of it was. Whereas I'm much more into that, and even now, I'm like, well, if it doesn't improve the film, don't bother. I mean, it's not a tech fest. But sometimes it can be. And men, with all due respect to all my colleagues and um, peers, they can get a little bit obsessed with the tech side of things, which I never did. And although I have, no, I don't, I'm not scared of it. I don't get obsessed with it. I actually would rather do it the simpler way if I can. This most simple
Well,
way.
I can imagine coming from like a painting background, the lighting, like how you approach lighting in a painting is quite similar to gaffing.
But yes, because I look at the, the lamps and the the tools of my trade are just like brushes and light and paint, and so in a way I'm kind of doing it at somebody else's behest, but I am also doing it myself. So I look at it as a box of painting tools.
Yeah.
But I think that's true to everything. I think everything you do is exactly the same. And people get a bit stressed, and I'm like, but it's the same as cooking or whatever you do. Just use the same methodology
Hmm.
that you do with those, and you'll find it much easier. So I'm
How
actually
would you
reading a
just
book. Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
going to
okay.
introduce this book here, which is very good. I'd recommend it to anybody who's a creative person. Creative Act.
I read that 10 times. It's like
Yeah,
one of
there
my
you go. So
favorite
you get
books
it
of all time.
exactly. And you're like,
Yeah.
and he says it in there. He's like, don't think about it as a. I think I heard it as an audio book, which I like because I like his voice. But he says that thing of transfer the, because we all get obsessed about, oh, we can't do this or so. Actually, if you- like he says, I have no technical qualities, I have no technical abilities. You just transfer things. So you go, I don't know, you do everything you do with that thought. The things you do with that
Yeah.
thought transfer to your things, become them.
There's so many good quotes in that book. I feel like I have a whole note in my notes of like 30 quotes that I go back to.
Yeah. Well, that thing where you just open a book and read the first thing you see. I think the
Yeah.
second time I did it, I read it, and he says, "Oh, just open a book up, read the first thing you see." I'm like, "Oh, there you go," which is nice. It's like I feel like I'm on the right track. But I feel like historically in the past 10, maybe 20 years, it's become a very techie world in the film industry, and it's attracted a lot of techie people, which I have no direct problem with. But I wonder if it obfuscates the telling of the story, the
Mm.
message.
Because it's like more complex than thinking about it simply, or why do you say that?
Well, I guess it's a bit like anything, the thing is that in through life, I think you need to simplify it as much as you can always. And I think cinematographers who have been doing it a long time, I think do that for two reasons. I think they're bored of doing the same thing, and it's like, let's keep it simple so I can finish the day quicker. I get from point A to B as quickly as possible. All the other stuff is fluff. There are some cinematographers now who are more into the techie side, but historically there were more, certainly people like Roger Deakins and Janusz Kaminski and people like that were not into the techie side. Even some DOPs I've worked with are very big, don't even know the name of lamps. And they're like, just give me the big one. And I'm like, well, that's my job to a certain extent. And I kind of fit in between, I think. But I think a lot of guys, they're obsessed with the technology of networking, how things work in the sense of Wi-Fi and color balancing and all this stuff. And I do it much more intuitively, I think. But that's my
Yeah.
fine art training. It's not. But like cooking, I don't measure. I never measure.
Yeah. So you wouldn't like baking.
No, no, exactly. My wife's good at baking because she's more
Yeah.
scientific. She measures
Yeah.
everything, and I'm like, oh. So I just go, if it tastes good, it tastes good. Well, I do say to young people that who are coming into the industry, I said, just trust your taste, your intuition. If it looks and if it speaks to you, then take it. If
Hmm.
if you need technology to help you get there, fine, but you don't presume that it is, you know, don't make the technology the message, make the message the message. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, one of I think Rick Rubin's quotes in that book is look for what you notice but no one else sees, which I always love to come back to. Which say it's very simple, right? You just look at the shot and what do you see? Like what draws your eye?
because that's the thing. I mean, I went to a museum yesterday and I was like, I don't know who these painters are. If they speak to me, then the job is done. I don't need to know if they're Picasso or Van Gogh or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
it's a painting. It's like music. You don't go, who's that by? And I'm like, it's just you tap your, And I kind of wish I feel like anyway, I think it's modern life. Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah. How would you describe what a gaffer does in your own words?
Well, it's a bit like a sous chef, I guess. Is like they have the DOP, or well, the director has the understand. He has the script which he wants to put into practice in that sense. And the cinematographer has to facilitate that visually for him and create the mood. And I'm kind of his hands to say, I run the show, I run the lighting crew, but then I give that, I personally give that a bit more to my best boy and my ring gaffer. So I'm the kind of in between guy. I'm so more the eyes and the hands than the hands exclusively, but I kind of facilitate the preparation of the lighting department so he can light. But I also like lighting, so I kind of do it in a tandem. Some people don't like that, but I do. So I guess it's in its purest form. It would be like you run the lighting department, you organize the lighting equipment, and you set up the scene with your group of guys so that sorry, can tell you what they, allow them their creative push and pull.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be creative, and that's the thing. But if you are creative, then it's helpful because then you can say, well, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And of course, they are dealing with cameras, the director, the blocking, all those things. So in a way, my natural thing is to always bring that to the table, but it's not exclusive. You don't have to do
So
that. And I think when I started out, people didn't do it so much, and I've succeeded because I was different.
So is it like you figure out how to execute the lighting that the DP wants, or you work together to figure out the technical aspects of it?
Well, it's a we no. Well, again, it depends on the cinematographer because sometimes they're not that technical
Mm.
and they may be less experienced than me. So I kind of have an understanding. It's a very much a flavors thing. I think again, it goes back to food. It's like okay, you have a menu, which is a script. You have a flavor, so you go, oh, it's a little bit. And sometimes I actually use those words. It's like it's a little bit too spicy, or a little bit too salty, or a little bit bland, or too soupy. It's a bit like we need to differentiate between flavors. And I think that's why I think the chef thing kind of comes into play a little bit. It's like because actually at that point you're not saying, oh, we need another 11 radishes for this meal. We just need a little the flavor, the notes of the image is what's important, and that plays much more into very intuitive, almost not romantic. What's the word? Sensory things
Mm-hmm.
because you're like, it's like you go, oh, you remember that movie? And if you've done movies with them before, then obviously you have an understanding of their flavor levels.
Mm-hmm.
But they'll be like, oh, that film that was, I don't know, whatever it is, that kind of scene, that feel. And you're like, oh, yeah, okay. And how do you get that? And so I would get, interested in the technical only if I had to. So I would be much more into the mood, colors, what it makes you feel like, that's the thing that
Yeah.
excites me, I guess.
And is there a difference between a gaffer and a chief lighting
Technician,
officer?
no. Gaffer is a colloquial word which means senior person. Actually, there's gaffers in England. There's gaffers in football teams who are the chief, the boss, and on construction sites.
Hmm.
And I think it comes from shipping, marine, nautical, actually, because in Spanish, gaffer is jefe, and I think it just means boss. And I think when the movie industry started, they used to use gaff hooks to hold up the nets, and I think the guy who was the boss who came along with it was known as the gaffer because it's
Yeah.
a verb as well. Can you gaff this for me? I'm like, it seems very weird. So chief
Yeah.
lighting technician's more, it's less colloquial and more. I prefer it in a way for um, offset. I wouldn't say, oh, I'm the chief lighting technician. I always go, I'm a gaffer. But there's only one gaffer on a set, so it's quite nice.
And what's the traditional progression? Is it best boy, then gaffer? Like what is?
Yeah, you'd be an electrician, best boy, and then into gaffing, I guess. But you don't have to. There's no kind of
Yeah.
rules. People do it. Some people just very naturally find their position. They're not. They're, I think that's what I love about the film industry is you could enter in as the guy who cleans the toilets and leave as a producer. Because
Mm.
actually, once you're in, you can find your way through to any position, good or bad.
Do you have like a non-negotiable kit
What
for
rate?
not rate, just like what's in your kit? Like is there something that
No,
maybe
because
no?
in England we're not owner operators in like in America, Australia. We
Oh,
don't tend to do it.
interesting.
I have a kit, but I don't automatically bring it to the table. It's much more run by. So I don't know why. Historically, it's always run by lighting companies in Europe. The lighting company will have like Warner Brothers or Panelux, all these people would have MBS would have the equipment, and we bring a bit of equipment. But in America, the gaffer would have the majority of the equipment and then sub rent it from the thing. If it was a studio shoot, I believe that then the lighting would be from the studio. I think I'm not 100% sure. So I don't have. What I do have is like a chef. It's a bit like you have your knife. So I always insist on my own pieces. But like here in Budapest, I can't bring anything out, and sometimes it's just by the time you get it here, it'll be finished and you'll be going home. And production always like, oh, it's extra money. Like, ugh. So it's like, but I'm very much a flavor. It's like I can go and buy stuff that I can, like I tend to do is go to a textile company and see what they have, and I'll go to the hardware shops and buy stuff and build up a little kit. So I don't have a. It's like I think it's like being in the military. You just go. You are the thing, and then you can buy your. It's a terrible word, not weapons, but you choose your
Yeah.
things accordingly. You're the important bit.
Has there been like a most challenging project you've been on
But yeah,
in hindsight? Yeah.
yeah. The two, I think the one I just did, which was very challenging, reminded me of the other one I did, which was also very challenging. So 20 years ago, I did a film in Thailand with Werner Herzog, who's notorious as not a difficult filmmaker, but certainly ambitious. And he did a very famous film called Fitzcarraldo, which was about taking a steamboat through the Andes, not the Andes, through the Amazon, down the Amazon. And famously, the story is that they couldn't go around the river because of the rapids, so they had to take the boat over the mountain. And if there's an amazing documentary called well, there's two actually. One's called My Best Fiend, which is about the relationship between him and this actor who plays in Fitzcarraldo called Klaus Kinski, who was dead now, and it's Natasha Kinski's father. And so I got a call. It was my birthday, 2006, I think. And they said, "Oh, we're looking for availability for this film in Thailand with Werner Herzog and Christian Bale." And I was like, "Nah." I was like, "Is this a joke?" I was like, "Really?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Okay, sure, I'm available." And again, a bit like this job or other jobs, nothing happened. And then I phoned up and said, "Look, is it happening?" And they're like, there's a bit of a problem." And I was like, "Oh, it's not happening." And then they went, "No, no, there was some political stuff going on in Thailand with Werner's production manager and stuff." Then they said, "Look, we don't know what's going on. Here's Werner's number. Give him a call." And I was like, "Okay." It was a bit weird because Werner, I grew up with us when I was a young, 16-year-old watching his films, just going, "That's crazy."
Mm-hmm.
There were things of legends. There were myths of this kind of crazy German director who did these amazing films, and they are amazing. Anyway, so I ended up going to Thailand again without a contract. I landed there on October, no, or August maybe, and it was all just very weird. And it went on like that for 2 months, 3 months. We travelled all over Thailand. It's very stressful, hot, a bit. Werner has also this way of creating a slightly mist of chaos around him. I won't be the first to say it. There's an article in the New Yorker about it actually, and I mentioned. And the production company would leave the village, leave the city without paying their bills, and a lot of people left because they were like fed up with the conditions, and it became this big gnarly thing. And it was interesting. So that was very stressful. We were there for 3 months, specifically because it was hot, and Werner's world can be quite stressful. And I was young. I was only 10 years into my career, and I was a bit like, "Oh." And of course, when I got the call, I was like, "Oh my god, I can't do this. This is crazy." I was terrified actually, not in the sense of I was fascinated and compelled, but terrified at the same time. And I knew it was going to be stressful. I knew it was going to be difficult. And then somebody said, "Well, just do it because you can always come home." And I think that's the thing. Is like
Hmm.
nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I was
Yeah.
right. It was crazy.
I can only imagine.
It's a roller coaster, and you have to approach it like that. It's like going into a battle a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
without being too dramatic about it. And then I just did a film called Werewolf with Robert Eggers, which hasn't come out yet, so I've got to be careful what I say. But it was very stressful in other ways. It was the same. It wasn't Robert. He was not a chaos merchant or anything. He was very nice, and it was just arduous because of weather and conditions. And we were in these forests and in the winter and wind and rain, and it was a bit like the thing is, again, it's that the film industry always tries to find the path of least resistance by its very nature, and sometimes you just end up in a place where you can't find. It's literally an embargo. You can't find that path of least resistance. It's impossible, and that's when your passion and your drive comes in because you've gone past the hours, you've gone past the time. At some point, I'll say, "I'll give you £1 million," and they're like, I don't want £1 million. I'll just leave." And I'm like, "I'm done." And it's
Yeah.
difficult. You've got to go beyond the normal. We did silly hours, like 70-hour weeks, 7-day
Wow.
weeks, like, getting up and going through mud and just like piling all this stuff on. And it's like, most people are like, "Really, people are mental." I'm like, "Yeah, we got to get the movie made because you've got a script, you've got a plan, you've got a desire, you've got a thing." But at that point, money and all those things you do it for are kind of gone. So you're that point is when you're, that's when you start questioning why you're doing it and all those things. So
Yeah.
those two films were, but every film has its challenges. I guess that's the thing. But there was some which are like, oh, and actually the ones that you probably go, oh, that was easy, are very boring.
Yeah.
And there's no part, you haven't left any flesh behind.
Well, Werewolf I know is a period piece, so I'm curious if like what's the difference working on a period piece versus a present day.
In essence, there's no difference. But Jarin Blaschke, who is the DOP, is very much a Puritan in senses, and Robert is as well. He won't cheat on things. So when we're using fire, we light with fire. It's
Oh
it's
wow.
and it's ferocious. Whereas most people are like, hey, I'll just put some LED flickering effect on. Jaren's like, no, fire is fire. And rain is rain. We don't. You feel it. I mean, it literally is like. It's not whether it's period piece or not, but it's just, obviously we're not. They didn't have electricity in the 14th century, so or whatever it was. We're authentic to a point. Um, but again, it's flavors thing because of course, and actually I would notice if I see some movies set, over 100 years ago when they had no electric light, I think there's very subtle differences. You'd be like, I can tell that's electric light and
Hmm.
it's wrong. And I think there's a lot of cheating going on recently in certainly TV stuff where you're like, guys, come on, that's not cool. That's, to me, I'm like, you push me out of the picture because I know it's not right. And it's not a snobbish thing. It's just like the subtleties of lighting is you're being very brash with it. And I think that's the thing. So I think you have to be more attentive to what the fixtures you're using, how you're using them, where you're placing them, because of course we're in a very different world and people didn't have. I mean, I've been on movie sets where they have all these lights burning. I'm like, this is 1947 England. People had nothing. They
Yeah.
didn't. You wouldn't be burning light because it's expensive, and people couldn't afford it. And they've got all the lights on in the house in the daytime. I'm like, and equally in the 17th century, people wouldn't because it was very expensive to have candles and wax, oil and stuff. It was brought from far away, so it wasn't like you could just switch on lights. But of course, we're making a movie, so we need lights. Jarin and thingy would and Robert would be very specific. So you people didn't have big light, they didn't have candles everywhere burning because we couldn't do it.
So they honor it. They honor that kind of fact.
They lean into it more, yeah. They wouldn't say,
Yeah.
we have to have exposure, but they wouldn't, they wouldn't be. I do think it's wrong actually because I think within the essence of a movie, there's a truth and an honesty about it, which the more you push into it, the better it becomes. And I've been on a movie. It was set in 1950s England, and there was these guys talking, and the cinematographer had all the practicals on in the daytime, and I was like, they just wouldn't do it. He goes, well, we need to see them. I'm like, well, yes, but no. So
Hmm.
actually, if you let's start switching them off and having a bit more guts and pushing into that a bit would be maybe better. I don't know. Again, it's a personal thing. I think that we get a bit too safe because also there's people going, oh, I want to see the actor. I'm paying $5 million for him. I want to see his eyes.
Yeah. I recently watched Nosferatu. Actually, I watched it when it came
Oh
out,
yeah,
which is a bit ago.
the Robert
And
Eggers movie.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And I'm not a scary movie person. Like
no,
I don't watch them. And it wasn't
chilling.
actually that's there was only one jump
No,
scare.
yeah.
And the rest I was just like, this is just genuinely a great film. And I'm curious. I know you can't talk too much about Werewolf, but I'm curious from working with Robert Eggers, his level of detail, like how that translates.
Yeah, his level of details, but also he doesn't do coverage, so he won't cut around the scene. And that's the
Mm.
other thing I do like very much. He's very honest he likes Herzog a lot. In fact, Herzog did a Nosferatu back in the day. So there's a
Oh.
connection there and I quite like it. His thing is that he doesn't like there's always the thing about coverage in movies. It's like you have to do a wide, then you do your close-ups, you do your medium close up, then you do reverses, then you do reaction shots and people looking at watches and all that. Robert Eggers will never do that. And actually, if you watch Nosferatu back again, you'll probably notice that there's a lot of shots which are just continual, and
Hmm.
it's very kind of draws you in. And I quite like it because I found it a bit not creepy. It was that movie. I'm not into horror as a genre particularly, but it was a bit like Rosemary's Baby. it has that thing where you just go, oh, I don't quite like. Yeah, there's something a little bit
Eerie,
unnerving.
yeah.
Yeah, like you just be like. And there's a scene where Nick, can't remember his name, the lead actor who plays the young guy. It'll come to me anyway. He's in a forest, and he's you can just see his like dread of going to Orlok's castle. He's just like, oh, and it's kind of, you just go, because I think the camera is very much, it doesn't pull away. It's just there following it. Um, so yeah, the detail is an important thing. I think
Well,
we
it's
become
kind
lazy, but also executives also want coverage.
well, it's
Studios always
interesting
want
because
coverage.
without the coverage, it feels kind of like you're there, which I think is what
Yeah,
makes it
because
so
you're not.
unnerving.
Yeah, you won't look away. There's nothing to go distract you from the face, from the
Hmm.
fear, from the or the whatever it is. And that's as much an eye for detail, but it's a way of shooting which is very distinctive, and also most studios don't like, because there's no way to. And actually, when we're doing Rescue Dawn with with Werner, the producers got a second camera in, and Werner refused to shoot it. He said, I will not use a
Mm.
second camera. And they're like, but think about the edit. He goes, no. And he would stand in front of the other camera and block it with his body to stop people shooting. And I was like, that's crazy, man. There's a whole crew there. Just use it. What are you, stupid? And in
Yeah,
hindsight, I think it was a bit foolhardy, because they're trying to help him, but also they're
yeah,
trying to help himself, is so there is coverage. So when you edit, you have, but there's, I think it's a bit like when you go into that movie, or as a movie maker, when you don't have a safety net, then you have to be really thoughtful about what you're doing, and have guts in it. And
yeah.
somebody said to me, actually, the guy who I used to work with in Liverpool when I first started, he said, if you see people are in danger, you believe them more. And actually, and that's not physical danger, but it's um, existential danger, is that by not having a safety net, people believe you, because there's a credibility, and it's a very subtle way of doing it. But it's like a guy on a high wire, and there's a net below, and it's like, well, he could still hurt himself, but yeah, there's a net. And if
Yeah.
putting yourself in danger can be a very compelling thing, but obviously we have responsibility to everybody else who's in danger with you.
Yeah.
But I'm talking more of an existential than physical.
Well, I just interviewed Chris Nolan's script
Yeah,
supervisor, who
yeah,
said that Chris doesn't do reshoots.
no,
So it's very
yeah.
like
If you
the
haven't got it,
excellence that you just have to get the shot. There's no chances to reshoot. So that's
yeah.
quite
And there's a
interesting.
there's a real thrill to that as well, because you're doing something that's very. You're not going backwards. You haven't got like, oh, we're coming back tomorrow, but the sun's fading. So you need to trust in all your people, and that was what happened on Werewolf. We had that thing, but of course we're in winter in the forest, and it goes dark at 3 o'clock. And if
Right.
we
Wow.
mess it up, and then it's pouring a rain or whatever, then it's like we have to. So it's not whether you want to do reshoots or not, but sometimes you are at the behest of the weather. And I think it's
Hmm.
like being a sailor. Actually, it's like you go, yeah, well, I'll take all the, what do you call it, all the safety measures, but there's also that point that you're in a storm with you can't, there's no safety that you can take. It's do or die. And I think that's
Yeah.
very thrilling. I think actually that's I like that kind of movie making as or artwork.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because to contrast that, I think you worked on The Martian with Ridley Scott,
Yeah,
who
yeah,
is a fan of multicam, right? So
yes, it does four
to work,
cameras.
how is
Yeah,
that
the opposite.
process versus
Well,
the
Ridley's a
opposite?
different person way of working, because Ridley does all his. I don't know about Chris Nolan, but Ridley does all his storyboarding, and he'd storyboard personally, so he'd build it all in his mind anyway. So really, he's just fulfilling the story that he'd already done, that he's played out in his mind. He doesn't do happy accidents as easily. He's not kind of that
Mm.
person. But equally, I think Ridley's just a different kind of character, a different kind of director, in that sense that you don't have to be swinging through the jungle. He doesn't do that. He's much more of he's much more methodical about his directing, and he's very clever at just doing last minute creative decisions, which I loved. Actually, he would just do stuff, and I go, oh, that's so smart. Just that it wouldn't be like, and it was very simple stuff. It was like he'd just say, oh, get a bit of. There was a bit where we were outside of we were shooting in the studio as if it was Mars outside. Matt Damon's cleaning the satellite dishes, and um, Ridley would say, he said to his props guy, who he'd known for work for many years, he said, I'll get some tinsel, like Christmas tinsel. like the ribbons
Yeah.
of foil, and just stick them on the edges of the thing where they come from. Who cares? And then just put a fan on them, and it will blow, and it will create a feeling of a level of atmosphere that you didn't have to do it. It didn't make any, But again, you're like, smart. And if
Hmm.
he put something in front of camera and it's moving, it creates you're tricking. It's an illusion thing, which I like. It's not about like, oh, we're pretending. Whereas Werner and maybe Robert Eggers would be like, no, we're going to the place to make the movie.
Hmm.
Ridley's much more smart. Well, it's not smart, but much more clever in his way of. He's like, no, I can't do that, so I'm gonna sell the illusion. But he came
Mm.
from an art director's background, so it's a different kind of smart, I think. But it can be boring. I think that's the problem. But when Ridley gets it right, he gets it really right.
Is it more demanding for you from a lighting plan perspective to work with Ridley or with someone like Robert?
Different. It's just Robert. The thing is that it's different. You just have to. You always have to have your wits about you. And Ridley would just sort of say, he'd be like, "Oh, turn over," and then he'd say, "Can you?" And you're like, "Oh, turning." There's the movies we're shooting, so yes, but it's kind of like there's a whole. Whereas with Werner and Ridley, with Rob, it's more like, oh, you're kind of lashed to the mast a little bit, and you're in the ride. So there's no
Right.
last minute stuff in that sense. It's just all the weather and things. They're both
Yeah.
equally thrilling and stressful in different ways.
Yeah.
At one point, Ridley said to me, I still remember it. It was like cartoon. He said, "Could you?" I can't remember what it was, and I kind of went, "No." I didn't say. I just said, "No, I can't." And he said, "Did you just say no? You can't?" I said, "Yes." And I could tell everybody sighed with relief because it was like, it's quite imperious. And I was like, "Oh no, that's the end of my
Was he like
day."
okay?
Yeah, he was fine.
Yeah.
Because as long as you're straight with him, he's fine. But it's a thing of that he knew that the ploy was, if you did you just say no, and I'd be like, because if I said yes or no, it makes it funny either way. No, I didn't say no. Yes, you did.
Yeah.
So I gulped a little bit and went yes, and it was physically impossible. It wasn't that, as
Mm.
long as you try, that's the thing. And actually, Werner would be the same, and Rob would be the same. As long as you put the effort in and not just go like, oh, I'm not bothering. I don't. And I think that's what I like as well. People will be like, no, I can't do it. I'm like, what do you mean no? No, you have. If you really thought about it, I get it. Well, then if you explain to me why you can't do it, I'll understand. But just say no.
Right.
No,
And don't, not try.
I don't
Yeah.
do it. Yeah, because we're here. We're all trying to create the same thing. And actually, that 5%, 10%, 1% more effort could make a huge difference. So,
Hmm.
I would always appreciate it.
I also saw that you worked on the movie Locke, the 2013 film, which is like a one man, one car film.
Yeah, yeah,
How do you light a story that lives like inside of a car
yeah.
for the
One
whole
for 1 hour and 40 minutes. So
Yeah.
Locke was shot over 8 days, and it was done all
Mm.
on a car, basically. Well, apart from one scene at the beginning. It was very low budget, and Harris, who I worked with, said, "Oh, Steve Wright, who's written scripts and directed it, wanted to." He was fascinated by the whole kind of bokeh and the moving lights and the kind of dreaminess of it, and he wrote the script purely because he'd been working on a movie with Chris Seeger, I think it was, and he said that they'd done some shooting on cars. So I love that way. The light is just the kind of it's beautiful actually. It's a very nice way of somebody in a car. It's very dreamlike. And I think it goes back into our very primeval thing of when you're kids and sleeping in a car and you just have this kind of motion, kind of very, very dreamlike. So to do that, we basically had to. So what was great about it and was very short. It was 8 day shoot. We had no rehearsals, so we just built it,
Whoa.
put it on a low loader, drove. But because there was only one actor, we did the script 3 times a night. So we did the whole script 3 times, and so it's a very different way of working on a movie. So Tom Hardy would sit in the thing with the teleprompter, do the script. We'd have people doing live from a hotel room. We'd have all the other actors, Olivia Colman and different people doing their thing on the, so it was all live. And again, you feel it.
Mhm.
He was not driving. He was on a low low, but he was acting to something. And I really liked it. And also then I was on a little dimmer board responding to what was interesting actually. So first I had a monitor and it was 15 years ago, I guess. So we didn't have this technological thing. We couldn't afford it either, but it was a monitor, so I could watch what was going on. And then somebody said, "Oh, here's headphones," and I put that on. But okay, now another layer came in of we had audio, we had vision, obviously audio, but I'm sitting on a freezing cold low loader in February with 8 people, and they're all watching, and Tom's doing his like one man theatre piece. And
Mhm.
because we did it three. So Tom only did 4 nights, I think, or 5 nights, and the rest was GVs and then backs of heads and stuff like that. So we used to double. So Tom would do the whole script 3 times. So we'd do 1 hour and 40 minutes driving, no breaks, no cuts or anything. Or if he fluffed a line, he'd come back and do it. But we'd all basically just shoot all the time. 2 cameras, and then we would stop, pull over, re-rig the cameras, or change lenses. So we go from a wide to a tight or move the lens cameras. And then at one point, Harris had a good idea, which again is selling the illusion. He put a mirror, two-way mirror between him and between Tom and the camera, which would reflect all the lights behind. Which, of course, if you're looking
Oh.
through a window, you'd never see. It doesn't make sense. So, but it's in your head. It's like, yeah, I get that. But it's kind of beautiful, dreamlike. And Tom's, because Tom was going through this whole. It was an hour and 20, 40 minutes of a man's change from the beginning at the end. He was a very different person. It was absolutely fascinating
Mhm.
as a thing. Watching it as a theatre piece and being part of it, and also then seeing it afterwards, I was like, oh, that's really smart, really clever. And
Yeah.
actually, they sell it as a thriller, but it's not. But I don't know how you'd sell it.
And you drove that you were on a real road versus an LED because they didn't really have
Yeah, we're on
LED
open road.
stages.
Yeah, and again,
Yeah.
I would rather do that, however cold and miserable it is. It's
Yeah.
you sell it, and I would love to do a bit of a test actually with virtual production. And say, okay, let's make a movie or make a scene from a movie that we like, whether it's Apocalypse Now or whatever, and good or Locke, and say, let's put it in a virtual production stage and let's try and do a blind tasting with people and say what's the difference. What do you
Yeah.
feel? Because actually, there's a dynamism about real life weather, all those things, which put a lot of pressure on you as a movie maker and as an artist, as a technician. Once you take those pressures away, it makes it into a very different world. And again, you're selling the illusion, but it'd be a fascinating experiment.
Do you not you, but the production get any more pressure to do it on LED stages now versus like on the road?
No, no, I think most people would. I think experienced actors would probably prefer it. I think that to be on the real thing, because you feel the bumps in the road, you literally feel the energy, the cold, all those things, and they affect you. They all play back into you. But then equally, they could say, well, we're in theatre, we don't do that, and that's what acting is not being that. But there's no pressure in the sense of. I think actually it's not cheaper in some ways.
Yeah.
It doesn't make. It's just. I did a commercial a couple of months ago in a virtual production stage, and it's the only way. It was kind of written for a virtual production stage. So, but no, there's no pressure as such. It's just. I got to say, I don't like it or dislike it. I think it's just different, and you have to treat it as different. It's not. It's a bit
Yeah.
like, do you make your pancakes from scratch, or do you get a packet and empty it and then
Yeah.
whisk it and do people really know? Does it?
Yeah. And I have to mention one more film because it's like my comfort movie, which is
Mm.
Crazy Rich Asians. Was
Oh yeah,
such an epic film.
I
How
know.
was your experience on that?
Well, Crazy Rich Asians again. I turn up and I'm like, man, these people just. I don't know about this. I don't know what's going on here. It's very kind of like, oh. And I nearly left, and my best boy said, "We don't quit." And I was like, "Well, this time I might." So it was something weird. But we had just moved. So the story is, I just finished a movie in England, well, in Malta actually, Murder on the Orient Express, and we had just literally wrapped it. And me and my wife were there, and we were just about to go into the cathedral to look at these paintings by Caravaggio, which is not important, but it kind of like it. I like it, like that. That's what we were doing. That's part of the story. And I got an email, and I was like, I deleted it. It was like a thread that had been cut and pasted, and I was like, so looking for a gaffer in Asia, and I was like, yeah, right. And I deleted it. And then I kind of went, oh, maybe that wasn't what I thought it was. So I reread it, and I said to my wife, do you fancy going to Asia for 3 months? And it had been a recommendation through a cinematographer I'd known for a while. And
Hmm.
she was like, yeah, why not? So on April 1st, I went to Asia again without really a plan. There's a lot of trusting in the film industry. But as soon as I met John Chu, actually, I was like, I think we're okay, because John was a very nice man, but also very smart, and had
Hmm.
an energy about him which I really liked. And I liked a lot of the people around who were involved in the movie, but we didn't have much money. It was a very wing and a prayer and a little bit.
Really? It didn't
Yeah,
seem
no, it
like
wasn't.
that when I
No,
watched
we
it.
had no, and I felt like some of the producers didn't really care if it got made or not. That's what I felt, and there was a
Mm.
bit like. And at one point, I said, "Are we going to, are we going to scout Singapore?" And the response was like, "No. What's the point?" I was like, "That's crazy." We're doing 2 weeks of nights in Singapore, in a country which I know not much about, but I know they don't just kind of want you to rock up. And having done my film in Thailand, I knew. I think I had a bit of PTSD from that, actually, from being
Mm,
in Thailand with Werner. I was like, I don't know if I want to go back there. I can't go, man. I can't go back, man.
that makes sense.
And then I trusted. Then I guess it's a bit like, I think it's like crossing a ice floe. Take it slowly. You need to get to the other side. How you get there, don't just run. It's the thing I like about movie making is that it's not just about making movies. It's a very personal thing. It has to feel like there's an effort to it. That has to, well, creativity.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be kill. It doesn't. You don't want to die doing it, but you want to feel like you've changed. That there's a metamorphosis involved in you, and that's my personal thing. I don't think everybody should do it, and some people don't want to, leave their kids, and I don't blame them. But we don't have kids. My wife loves traveling, so and I love the process of being in a place where I might be not physically in danger, but that I will see different cultures and be in different places and witness something and have an involvement which is beyond just the ordinary. And
Yeah.
that's what
I
movie
mean,
making is. It's being a sailor.
and it kind of goes back to the creative act. One of my favorite things he says, which I'm sure studios hate, but it's the audience comes last, and it's
Yeah,
like create the best thing you can possibly make for you,
yeah.
and that will likely be the most thing that resonates. But that is against every commercial instinct that
Well,
they
this
have
is the
as
thing, and
studios.
and it's that at that point you're an auteur, so it's like, oh, I don't care about the audience. It's like, do you play to the audience or play above their heads? It's like, are you
Hmm.
pulling them with you or saying, oh? And I think the problem is historically Hollywood movies definitely have been a little bit like, listen, we don't really care what it's about. We just need to fulfill. We're investing however many million. We need to get a return on that. We don't care whether it's and there's a symbiotic relationship there, obviously, between the two, but it's not necessarily um, it's not mutually exclusive. You can do one without the other, and there's no shame in it. Some things are just entertaining, but if you then start going, it's like, oh, there's certain scenes I go, oh man, it's so obviously what you've done there. You've got the star that you've paid all this money for, so they have to be front and center, and it lacks. It's a little bit cheap,
Yeah.
but that's the thing is, it's an industry. You have to. But ironically, the things that become critically more successful are not commercially successful because they talk to people. Actually, a
Hmm.
lot of movies which are financially successful don't really talk to people, and that's why you know um, the sequel exists, because they're like, well, we've put 10 million, well, whatever it's 100 million in, we made 500 million out, so ipso facto we can do that again and still get a good return. They'll cut the budget, lose a few actors who are too expensive, keep the heroes there, and really the script is just really a pastiche of itself. Again, it's not a problem, but if you keep flogging that horse, it eventually gets a bit tiring. So and then
Right.
new people come along, have a different view. They do something, and then there's executive who goes, "Yeah, I want everybody." I'm sure when Barbie did well, they're like, "Oh, we need to make action figure movies because that's the new thing." Because we see money, they don't care about what it's about.
Yeah.
And I think Werner and people like that always rail against it, But we need those people in both ways. We need the thing is that we need the Werners and the Robert Eggers and the people to be making things not difficult, but finding the harder way to work with the people who've got the money to find the easy way. And if they can find some symbiosis, then we have Godfather Part Two. We have those amazing movies which were life changing for a lot of people. But you need
Hmm.
to have the person who is the guy who's producing it has to have that vision as well. It's
Yeah.
a tough thing because they're trying to kid the people who are investing the money that they're going to make a return when they actually don't really know.
Right.
That's quite scary. One of the best
Very
books actually
scary.
is Easy Ride. Oh no, The Kid Stays in the Picture, which is a Robert Evans biography, and there's a documentary movie about it as well, and it's really fascinating because he's just winging the whole thing, and you're like, it's his charm, guile, and and his fortitude, and saying, hell no, I'm not going to let that happen. I believe in this project, not just like. And I think that's really important. That you need those people who are mavericks to a certain extent, with their hands on the money as much
Hmm.
as, but equally directors have to understand that they have to play their part as well. that at some point they're like, we can't climb a volcano which is erupting because it's going to be the end of the movie.
Right.
And it might feel more real, but it also be very dangerous for everybody. So
Yeah. Has there been a film you've watched recently that like stopped you in your tracks from a lighting perspective in a good way?
um I sort of well, there's films that I've kind of resonated with me. One was called Eileen, actually, and I keep talking to people about it, and I've watched it again. I still do like it. It was by Ari Wegner lit it, and it's a
Mhm.
very kind of Patricia Highsmith movie, and it's kind of I liked it because of the story, but also there's kind of a gutsiness to the lighting as well, and it harked
Mm.
back to a very much more kind of using the shadows. I also worry. I mean, less so now with TV because Game of Thrones and things like that have allowed people to go much darker than these, so that everything was slightly overlit. And the '70s was a very good period of lighting. I thought it had, people like Gordon Willis and Conrad Hall, and then it's kind of got a bit wishy washy, and then has come back again. But that film specifically, that was a couple of years ago. I have to say, I did love Nosferatu. I thought it was really my kind
Yeah.
of movie. Trying to think of. I don't. Again, I think it's like it can be. It can be the best burger you ever had. It can be a fast food joint, or it could be a little mum and pops, nonna's thing, and you have the best meal, or it could be a super fancy restaurant. They all work. It's just don't go into the mum and pops, corner shop expecting a fancy meal because it's not going to be there. It's going to be a very much a
Yeah.
homemade. The plates will be chipped and the forks won't match the knives, and there won't be somebody waiting on you hand and foot, but actually the quality of the food's amazing. If you then get a huge bill for it, you're like, well, that wasn't worth it. So in a way, the thing is equally going into a fancy restaurant and the staff are just so snooty, or the
Mhm.
food, there's no character to it, is equally, not worth the effort of when you get the bill and you're like, yeah, the food is good, but was it worth it? So
Yeah.
I kind of with movies, I kind of, again, I think art's like that, and again, probably in the creative act, there's a whole thing about that. If something speaks to you, it speaks. It doesn't have to be country and western or hip hop or whatever. It just hits the right note at the right time. It's got a very honest thing about it, and it hits the zeitgeist or whatever, or it just talks to you, and you're open to be talked to, and
Yeah.
that's what art it should be, I think.
I agree. And you just mentioned Game of Thrones. I'm curious. I know you worked on a couple episodes for that show. How is that different from working on a film? Because you're diving into it when it's already established,
Well,
right?
the thing about Game of Thrones is I literally had 1 day's prep. I
Oh
got
my
there,
god.
and so what happened is that um, movie. So season 6, they had two units running. It's huge. I mean, it's a big undertaking, and I'd never watched it, or I watched maybe one episode, and never didn't really wasn't my genre. And I got a call. I remember sitting with somebody, and I got a call, and I said, no, I'm not interested. The money wasn't great. It was blah, blah. So it was a huge ambition, massive canvas. The money is kind of TV level, so I was a bit like, well, it's not my, I don't know, it just didn't appeal to me, and I was like, no, and so I knocked it back, and then I got another call like 3 days later, and said, oh, would you consider it? And I was like, okay, now this is getting a bit weird, and I was like, well, no, not really, and I said, well, why not? I said, well, because the money's no good.
Hmm.
But I said, and also I said, when would I start? And they said, oh, and this was, I got the call on Thursday. They said, oh, I would be flying out on Monday and start shooting the following week. And so on, the following Monday, and I was like, well, that's only a week's prep. It's just crazy. So then it took me until the following Monday to get the call back again. I said, well, when do you want me to come? And I couldn't come till Thursday, I think, or Wednesday. So I landed on Wednesday, and they said, oh, we start shooting on Monday. And I'm like, and then the other gaffer, who Tom Gates, said, oh, I'll give you a week to get up to speed. And I said, don't worry about it. I just dived straight in, and I liked
Wow.
it. It was very thrilling, but I had nothing to lose, so it was good. But it was very nice people. It was a machine that was running at full pelt. So they created basically a third unit, which was called the White Walker unit, and I felt that was part of my destiny to be Mr. White doing the White Walker unit. And because I had no apprehension about doing it, I was like, oh, a lot of people are like, oh my god, Game of Thrones, it was like this big thing, and I was like, well, to me, it didn't make any difference. If it
Yeah.
had, I probably would have been very excited and very full of nerves, but I wasn't. So I was kind of like, yeah,
Hmm.
whatever, I'll just dive in. And I walked at the first set. I don't know if you watched it, but anyway, I couldn't even tell
Yeah.
you the first shoot, and everything was kind of set as well. Actually, once you got there, you realize, oh, actually, most things are already set. The lights in position. You just need to turn up, the actors will turn up, the director will turn up, and they'll shoot a scene. And then, oh, actually, one day I had 3 different directors, 3 different DOPs, and
Oh
I'd
wow.
moved from. And I showed you the schedule they gave me. I was like, I have no idea what any of this means. It was like 3 pages of, break down the schedules. Just like, so I kind of was like, yeah, just. It's like somebody saying, "Hey, do you want to go to India tomorrow?" And I'm like, yeah, okay. I haven't got any clothes really, but anyway, yeah, fuck it, let's go. And you just turn up at the airport and go. And it's super exciting. It's like, well, I had nothing to lose. If you think about it too much, then you probably wouldn't. So the first scene I did was all these people from different families. And my best boy, the best boy who I was given at the time, walked in and went, "Oh, I wish I hadn't seen that." And I was like, "Why? What are you talking about?" He said, "It's just ruined the whole of the season for me because those people shouldn't have been in that room together." So the understanding of what the story is now completely different to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, and Belfast again. It's very wet, windy, cold, dark. It's not fun, but I enjoyed it, and it was only I had nothing to lose, and the producers, one of them was David Benioff. The other guy, I can't remember his name, came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm so thank you for coming." And I was like, "Hey, dude, it's no problem." I was
Yeah.
like, they like, I don't know, it became like I was the hero had come over, the cavalry had turned up, and I became. But again, I did all the exciting things. I did all these scenes which people were like, "Oh my god, you did that!" And I was like, "Yeah, I didn't." One interesting thing. So I walked onto set and they said, "Oh, could you go up and adjust?" There's a guy. It was a scene called Hodor, with a
Mhm.
raven. And there's a raven up in the thing, and I go, "Yeah," and they go, "Oh, it's Max von Sydow," and I'm like, "Max von Sydow's here," and he was like, some of my when I was a kid, all these amazing, uh, movies. This huge Swedish actor, oh, hi, Cat. And I went up there and I was like, "It's Max von Sydow." I was like, it's so weird. It was so like, like a pinch yourself. And I said, "Oh, hi, Max. How are you?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm fine, thank you." I said, "I didn't expect to find you." He goes, "I didn't really expect to be here either." And I said, "Oh," I said, "I don't really watch Game of Thrones." He goes, "Oh, yeah, I watched a couple of episodes. It was interesting." And then I said, "So why are you here?" He goes, "Oh, the money's very good."
That is a good
And I
reason.
think, well, again, that's the industry, isn't it? It's like at the end of the day, we have to pay our rents. And he was like, "Oh, well, the money's good." I was like, "That's
Yeah.
fair enough." But it's one of those kind of like every day was like a very different, I did all these kind of bits where people were like, "Oh, that's where Jon Snow wakes up, from his death." I was sitting next to him.
Oh
I was
my
like,
god.
"Oh my God." And I'm like, "Oh, why? What's that about?" I had no clue. So it was funny.
It's so interesting the way like you're just so down to go and like say
Oh, yeah,
yes. It's
I'm almost. I tell you what, if I have like, they're like, "Oh, in 3 months' time there'll be this shoot," I'm like, I'm not really. I know it's going to be so far away and it's not going to happen, and it's a bit like Game of Thrones, Crazy Rich Asians, Werner's job, this job. It's like it almost compels me to want to do it because I feel like it's a challenge. A lot of people are like,
yeah.
"Oh, it's not, it's not happening." I'm sure I'll fall foul of it, but in a way, it's a bit like it's probably like back in the day, you're probably sitting in some bar in a port town, and somebody goes, "Hey, we're going to Fiji. You want to get on board?" You're like, "Yeah, sounds good."
It's almost like it's happening. So you're like, okay, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, where do I sign up? It's now. It's going. Let's do it. And I'm like, great.
Yeah.
And that, as I talking about when I first met that guy in the art college, it was like I'm almost. It's almost more compelling for me if it's like that. I grew up in a very, we moved around a lot as a kid and all that, and the film industry works for me in a lot of ways because it's like I don't have a base. I don't really in my mind have a tribe. I'm from everywhere. So when I go to places, I'm always fascinated by it, and I learn languages and I meet people. I went to Saudi Arabia a couple of years ago, last year, and people were like, "Oh," and I would always be a little bit anti-Saudi because of its politics, and I was like, you know what, I know that things have been changing, and I've been to part of Saudi Arabia previously, and I was like, I'm not going to judge it until I go there.
Mhm.
Equally, Hungary's had its issues as a lot of other places, so I wouldn't judge a person by its culture or by its politics, as it were. So I went with an open mind, and I found it one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had for people, actually. And I started learning Arabic, and I was like, "Oh, it's not what I." And I'm prepared to have my mind changed about places. I'm not going to be like, this is a rich life that we want to lead, and I want to do that with an open mind and go and see places for myself. they'll like it. They won't go back. And there's other places where other people go, oh, it's amazing. I'm like, not for me.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, that's the point of it. Otherwise, it seems a bit painful.
Yeah,
Well, not
true.
painful, pointless rather. It seems a bit like what's the.
Yeah.
Is it just about money? Is it just about it's about the whole thing, the bigger experience. And I know Dio Gaffers from Jim Planette, who's American from LA, and I became friends with him. Same thing. It's like it's a rich history, and I'd rather look back on my life and go, "Oh, that was an adventure," than just like, I made loads of money and got a big house somewhere.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it really is no point.
Okay, so before I dive into this last section, which I call the final 5 takes, is there any project or thing that you wanted to chat about that I didn't touch on?
There's a film I did called Control, which black and white film about Joy Division, and again, I guess it's a bit like the others, but to that film was always very special to me because it was a bit like had a lot of personal involvement in it. It was a tough film, but I always look back on it and was very proud of what I'd done on that film. And it's still it was very small budget, 3 million euros.
Wow.
Anton Corbijn directed it, who I didn't really know but did because I grew up with all his images from New Order to the Patti Smith and the Protect. All these. He used to be a big rock and roll photographer, and it set me on a journey. For 10 years working with Martin Ruhr, who I became friends with, and I don't know, it's a very special film. And then Roger Deakins said it was his favorite film of that year, which always I thought, like, okay, cool. And there's a good heart, there's a very strong and authentic heart to it, and I think that's important for me. So
What was
that
the
was the one
story?
that I would. The Joy Division was a band from the 70s, and in Curtis, who was the lead singer, died very young, suicide, and
Mm.
they became New Order actually, and he suffered from epilepsy. He had epileptic fits and depression through it, and he was a very interesting guy. He took his like they're all very young in their early 20s, just ragtag kind of punk, not punk, but like they came out of like the Buzzcocks, the Clash, Sex Pistols, all that kind of gang who were just making up as they're like, we really want to make music, and they were very honest, and they didn't really have a clue. They had no money, and they became very influential. And his influences were like from Elvis to Johnny Cash to all these kind of weird, and he mixed it up in this very kind of very strong northern industrial, poetic, black and white kind of feel. I gotta say, and it was very
Mm.
just very honest. And my dad was from that area, from the northwest, and it kind of had it was very true. And again, I was in Italy. My brother was getting married. I got a phone call, and they said, "Oh, I'd like you to do an interview for this film." And I said, "Well, I'm in Italy." And actually, I flew back early to do it. There was a real compulsion for me to, and I can't quite tell you why.
Mm.
But when I was in Liverpool, I knew people who were kind of all were involved with Joy Division. So there's connections, and now actually connections is a big thing for me. If I can connect to it, there's a
Yeah.
point to it, then I'm much more inspired than if it's just cash.
Yeah. Well, I definitely need to watch that.
It's great. It's a very good hour and 40 minutes of good storytelling and done with simplicity. We had no money, so the camera doesn't move. It never pans because there's nowhere
Yeah.
to pan to. And to recreate, actually, the other thing is that people recreate 1970s Britain, or actually whatever you're doing, 1950s, 1970s, 2000s. And as well as I do, that in the 1950s, everybody wasn't walking around well, 1970s wasn't walking around in bell bottoms and, big glasses made of stars and things like that. It wasn't, The Spy Who Loved Me. It was very much that people were still walking around in the 1940s gear, and it was pretty shit. They hadn't got much money. It wasn't, it was very post-war Britain was very dark and dingy, and to recreate that takes a lot of subtlety because you're trying to remove stuff and not put it in. And every time I see a movie, that does like, oh, we're in Paris, and of course you have to have the Eiffel Tower, or we have to have the Red London bus, or we have to have, we're in the 70s, so everybody's walking around and being like 70s, or that it's the future, so everybody's walking around with new gadgets. Well, of course they wouldn't be. They would be walking around with stuff from the 2000s plus the 2050s because that's the way life is. And
Right.
it's a subtlety about it which I love. That you can do to create that is about really thinking about what you're doing, and not having money doesn't have to stop you from doing that. Actually, in
Yeah.
fact, it's probably a help.
I
Less is
love
more.
that. Yeah. I when I was doing my editing my short film, there was like a switch in mindset I had, which was like instead of adding, like remove as much as I can remove
Yeah,
that keeps the
absolutely.
story intact, and that's the film. So
I think it's in here as well. You know, it's that
yeah.
is be brave and take out stuff. Try and remove as much as you can. Going back
Yeah.
to Ridley, actually, there was a story that he would turn off lights and he would go to the DIP, turn that off, turn that off, turn that off, which is like, dude, you can't do that. And you're like, yes, I can. Remove. Let's keep it. Let's always try and make it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
You know, it's very important.
Cool. It is very important. All right. So the final 5 takes. Are you ready?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. So the first one is, I'll set the stage a little bit. So you're working on as many movies as you want to work on, but this is your last day on set for your last film. What are you going to do differently, or what do you do the same but cherish more of?
Well, one thing I straight to mind is I always shake hands in the morning and I always shake hands in the evening.
Hmm.
That was the only thing I ever do. I think it's really important to it's the contact between us and me and us, me and we. So and then to say thank you very much. I acknowledge you're a person. I'm not just off without saying thank you. Because
Yeah.
again, I lost my brother and father very young. I lost friends who never said goodbye and things like that. And I think it's very important as human beings that we do that. So that's the only thing I would say. The rest is just lighting and
Yeah, I love that. What is the best lighting advice you've ever heard or received?
I can't tell you actually. Keep it simple. Keep it simple.
Okay.
I was next to I was at a BS. I'll tell this as an adjunct to that, but I was asked somebody the same question. I was next to him. He was a very famous gaffer, still working. And I said, "Oh, have you got any advice?" He goes, "Yeah, make sure you keep the money up." And I was like, "Wow," because his logic is like, if the money's up, then you're okay. It's if you keep the money up, then everybody will be happy and they'll do better jobs. But as far as technically, I don't know. I think the advice that has been given to me, I don't have actually. I just think it's my advice would be just think about it. Use your brain.
What's the worst advice you've heard?
Keep the money up. I don't know. There's nobody has really given me direct advice like that in the sense of I can't answer that question actually.
Okay.
Again, I would say that my advice would be you think about it yourself, and then the other advice would be don't just presume that because they've done it, that's the way it should be done.
What's something you used to believe was true about lighting that you have now changed your perspective on?
Good questions. I can't answer that without thinking about it. It's quite a difficult. I can't do a instant response.
I'm putting you on the spot. I'm sorry. You can take
give me some
all
more
the time.
time.
Yeah.
Go to the next one. I'll come back to that.
Okay. If you could pick any role in the credits to be remembered for long after you're gone, what would it be? It doesn't need to be a film credit. It can be anything.
Well, I guess I again, it's a simplification thing. I try to demystify movie making a little bit. I think you see young people, not always, but they're just like, oh, they're so wide-eyed, and I'm like, listen, don't overthink it. It's like keep it, but we're all scared, we're all nervous. So I demystify her maybe an iconoclast to a certain extent. I don't think the movie industry should be bigger than it is, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That it shouldn't be seen as something. We're not saving lives. It's a process, but equally we are saving lives. So
right.
like
ground yourself versus
just be, stand on the firm, root yourself in the position that you are, pay attention and be here now. Be present. Don't think about the money because the money, and everybody's like, oh, when are we doing the big one? I'm like, this is the big one. This is every day, every second of every day is your day on this film set, is your last moment. And you could drop dead tomorrow. So don't think about the future. Don't think of the past. Be here now.
Yeah. Love that. Do you want to go back to the other one? That's the last one.
Remind me of the question.
What was something you used to believe was true about lighting that you now have changed your perspective on?
Well, I was going to say there's only one way, but I never really believed that anyway. I can't answer that actually. I've got to say, nothing springs to mind that there's whether it's a style of lighting or a concept of lighting or a way of, or a light or whatever that I have changed. I don't think the only thing that I've can say that is that nothing's changed or everything's changed.
Yeah.
Without being, mystique, what do you call it, enigmatic about it, but it's like, it's an evolving, light is organic, so it's always evolving. It's always, so it's like,
that makes sense. Well, thank you so much for being here and being on the podcast. This has been so much fun, and I know you're a busy guy, so I really appreciate you.
I'm on R&R.
The
But you're welcome.
R&R.
Thank you. Thanks for thinking of me as well.